I just wanted to talk about the recent attacks in Dublin City in the first instance, and I think many people have come to the realisation that Dublin city centre has become a national embarrassment. That isn't the fault of the people who live there, it's the fault of successive governments, and particularly under a Fine Gael government over the past 12 years we've seen Dublin city centre become dangerous, derelict and run down, and it is something that is a cause of huge frustration and embarrassment to the Irish people. And in the first instance we need to see an increase in Garda numbers, and we need to see government take action to revitalise Dublin city centre. That is the least that the people who live there deserve, but it's also needed for Ireland in terms of the image that we project to the wider world. The city centre of Dublin is the centre of the capital city of this country. It is the place where the Republic was declared and proclaimed, and it should be a source of pride, and instead it is, as I say, a national embarrassment, and government need to take responsibility to address that. Today we're also publishing this document, which is the Sinn Féin submission to the International Forum on International Security. People will be aware that Sinn Féin have been very critical of the format and the purpose that government envisaged for this forum, but nevertheless we used the opportunity, and we did so again in our written submission, to set out what we believe is a very positive story of Ireland's place in the world. We're a country that has experienced colonialism, and at the moment and for the past number of decades we've been a voice for conflict resolution and for peace internationally. We have a very proud record, particularly in terms of our Defence Forces role within the UN peacekeeping missions, and all of that needs to be crystallised and protected, recognising that we are in a changed global security framework. And therefore Sinn Féin's submission sets out very clearly that we believe that Irish neutrality and having an independent foreign policy must be the cornerstone of our approach to international affairs, that we need to invest in our defence forces so that we can ensure that we have a defence forces that are fit for purpose, primarily to defend Irish people, to defend the Irish nation, to ensure that we can monitor and defend our skies and our seas, but also that we can play that positive role in international institutions, particularly within the United Nations. And in order to do that we should enshrine the principle of neutrality into the Constitution, and then we should also work with other neutral states to actually protect that neutrality within the EU treaties. We've also set out the need to increase investment in our defence forces, as I say, and we also set out a framework in which we believe Ireland can play a positive and constructive role in the world through international fora.
I suppose you envision the Irish neutrality as strictly military neutrality, or is it also a case that it should be political neutrality as well? Obviously the Taoiseach visited Ukraine the last few days. Would that be sort of something that you, like, you know, for example, Mary Lou's Taoiseach, which he visited Ukraine?
I think there has been an attempt by some to portray military neutrality as a weakness, as isolationism. Nothing could be further from the truth. Irish neutrality is actually a very progressive way in which we can play a constructive role in conflict resolution, and neutrality doesn't prevent us from pointing and highlighting who the aggressors are in any situation. So when it comes to Ukraine, for example, there is one aggressor, and Ireland shouldn't be afraid at any point to actually point that out and to provide support through humanitarian and financial aid to those countries that are the victims of oppression and aggression. So yes, in terms of Ukraine, but we could go further and should go further in terms of being a strong voice for regions such as Palestine and other conflict areas in the world. Our neutrality, rather than preventing us from playing an active role in those areas, actually provides the platform that we can actually play a very constructive role in actually finding resolutions to conflict as opposed to participating in them.
So you would say that it's more essentially a military neutrality rather than political neutrality?
Yes, our neutrality has been well defined, although there has been attempts by Irish governments over recent years to muddy what neutrality means. But for us it's very clear. We don't engage in military pacts, we don't engage with military alliances, we don't engage in active conflicts other than to provide supports to those people who are the victims of those conflicts.
Can I ask you about the plan announced this morning for the Land Development Agency to buy tracts of land from developers to increase the affordable housing supply? What do you think of that? Is it a good plan?
I think LDA proposals, while in principle nobody has any objections to the LDA purchase and private land, we need to ask the question as to why the LDA aren't adequately developing houses on public land. And there is sufficient public land to develop. A huge number of houses then are currently being developed. There are questions in terms of what this will mean in terms of the affordability for houses into the future, because one of the weaknesses and the failings of LDA developments to this point is that the so-called affordable homes haven't actually been affordable to those people who are needing and who need to get a place to live. We know we're in the midst of a housing crisis. We need to utilise every mechanism in order to address that. We're not convinced that the LDA proposal is actually going to do anything other than increase the costs of housing for ordinary workers and families.
So is it that you think it could push up the price of land?
There's a huge fear that this could actually increase the overall cost of housing to those who need them. We're at a point in time where house and land prices are way beyond the reach of ordinary workers and families. We need to ensure that we have sufficient delivery of public social housing, but we also need to ensure that we have affordable housing that is within the reach of ordinary workers and families. That hasn't been delivered under this government, and there's no evidence that the LDA is in a position to do that through this proposal. And in fact, there is a fear that what the LDA are proposing could actually increase the cost to those people who desperately need housing.
Another issue announced by government this morning was the increase in the fees paid to home carers. And we've heard from the likes of Alone and from other organisations that they're worried that they won't get the same number of hours because they'll have to pay this pay increase, although it is welcome.
Of course, home carers should be paid an adequate and a living wage. There is a crisis in terms of fulfilling the hours that people have currently been allocated in terms of home care packages. But to increase the support, the financial support to those people who are providing the care, albeit very welcome, without simultaneously increasing the budget allocation to ensure that we can maintain and increase the level of home care supports that's provided to those who need it, would be, in my view, absolutely symbolic of a government that doesn't know whose right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing.
Just quickly, one last question. You mentioned the issue of Dublin City Centre. Would you say that those areas have become a no-go zone, like particularly O'Connell Street and Talbot Street, where we saw the assaults on the American tourists?
As I say, Dublin City Centre is a national embarrassment, and this is important. It's important in the first instance to those people who work and live there. It's important to those who visit there, but it's important to all of us as Irish people, because, as I say, Dublin City Centre should be a part of our country that we're all incredibly proud of. And unfortunately, it has become dangerous, it has become derelict, it has become very run down in parts, and that has been allowed to happen under the tutelage of successive governments, and particularly over the past 12 years of Fine Gael government. We've seen Garda numbers reduce, and we've seen the dereliction and the neglect of some parts of our inner city intensify. So therefore, I think this needs to be led at a government level. We need to ensure that in the first instance there are sufficient Gardaí in the area, but then we also need a broad-based plan that actually addresses the dereliction and addresses the neglect that has been too prevalent for too long.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a million, folks.